Joining us again for episode, I think this one is episode 8, for Your Health is Your Wealth. And today we have a special guest, a sister who. Our topic today will be pharmaceuticals and how they can become addictive. So we still have our same panel, Sister Ashley, Sister Darlene, and now, of course, our special guest, Sister Who. And of course, I'm Stephanie. So everybody want to say hello?
Shalom,
Good
family.
morning. Yeah, shalom, family. Good morning.
Good
Good morning.
morning.
A blessing to be here.
It is. Yes, it is. So, I mean, we want to think about how we started with this topic, how pharmaceuticals, specifically like opioids and different medications, can become addictive and also cause adverse side effects. Anybody
I
want to
have
jump
a
in?
I have a quick comment. I'm sorry to interrupt, but can you see two people already in the live? I mean, in the chat. I'm trying to say.
No, no, I
Uh,
can't.
because I see
Somebody,
Sister Bonnie and Barbara in. So I
oh,
don't know if they.
no, that's not it. It's your
Okay.
show. Okay, okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't see nothing just yet.
They're saying their wait is waiting. So I don't. Okay.
Yeah, I don't see anything.
Okay.
But we could continue. Oh, I see somebody. Okay, good. Hi, Shalom, Sister Susie. All right, y'all want to jump in? Go ahead.
I guess I'll start then. So, as Sister Stephanie said, there is a major concern in this country, but just in general, about the addiction of medication in particular. I know we are all familiar with street drugs like heroin or, cocaine, methamphetamine, and people know about those addictions and they get a lot of attention. In more recent years, we know that opioids have gotten a lot of attention, but they aren't necessarily the only drugs that are of concern. And I don't think that most people understand the difference between regular drugs that and I'm going to be using medications and drugs interchangeably, but I don't think people understand that regular drugs can also be addictive, and they don't understand the difference between prescription medications that are addictive and just prescription medications that need a little more monitoring. So everything that you get a prescription for may not be as dangerous. And for instance, there is a class of drugs called controlled substances. And controlled substances, and I'll just back up a little bit. My background is as a drug investigator. I'll just keep it as general as possible. But I spent over 20 years as a drug investigator, specifically dealing with pharmaceutical drugs that are either prescribed in an illegal way or sold in an illegal way or used illegally. And when I say that, we all know that you can go to the doctor and get a prescription for maybe a painkiller, or if you have congestion, you can get a decongestant. Sometimes it requires a prescription. And those are the drugs that I'm referring to, things like that. But a lot of these drugs are either addictive, most cases they are. There's just a range of the addictive qualities. So the drugs that I want to focus on are going to be controlled substances. And any controlled substance that you get has to get a prescription from the doctor. There is a difference between illegal controlled substances and legal ones. So, does anyone have a question first before I move forward? Okay, so the way controlled substances are classified, they are classified by schedules. and controlled substances range in Schedule 1 down to Schedule 5. Depending on the schedule, that is the way you can rate how addictive they are. All Schedule 1 controlled substances are illegal drugs. So that would be something like methamphetamine that you buy on the street, heroin that you get on the street. Those are Schedule 1s. There's no recognized legal use for it medically. So you would not be able to go to your doctor and get a prescription for a Schedule 1. Anything that is in Schedule 2, 3, 4, or 5, you have to get a prescription for. And those drugs, the lower the number, the higher the addictive qualities. So a Schedule 2 drug means that it has a high addictive quality, but it also has a great use for medical purposes. And a Schedule 5 would mean that it's not quite as addictive, a very low chance of you getting addictive, but it's still addictive, but it also has a medical purpose. So an example of what would be in Schedule 2 would be something like hydrocodone or oxycodone, Oxycontin. I think most people are familiar with Oxycontin. So those drugs are very, very addictive, and they can also be used for medical purposes. One thing to keep in mind, there are certain drugs that fall in Schedule 2. We've heard the names of them. We associate them with illegal drugs, but there is a pharmaceutical grade of that drug that can be used in the medical industry. And an example of that would be cocaine and fentanyl. So those are drugs that we all hear about on the street. Oh, we want to stay away from them. You can buy them on the street. But again, there is a different quality that's made specific for the pharmaceutical or medical industry. Cocaine can be used for medical grade cocaine, can be used in surgeries like eye surgery, and medical grade fentanyl is actually used in the hospitals when they put you to sleep for for your surgeries. But then there are other things like Soma, and I'm going to go down some of the drugs that we all may be familiar with. Someone in your family has taken them. You may have been prescribed them. Schedule 3 drug would be something like ketamine, Tylenol with codeine, and steroids or testosterone. Again, those are drugs that you can use for medical purpose, but again, you can get addicted to it. A Schedule 4 drug that would be, an example would be Xanax or Ambien or Tramadol. And then Schedule 5 drugs may be some of the Robitussin products, Lyrica, and promethazine with codeine. And I bring up some of these drugs because people get them and they will sell them on the street. There is a market on the street for these drugs. If you're in the rap culture or pop culture, a lot of people will know of lean or scissor. That is just the street name for promethazine with codeine. Very popular with a certain crowd. And again, there's a low addictive quality, but it is diverted on the street because there is an addiction for it. And there actually have been rappers and entertainers who have overdosed and died from that. So speaking of the overdoses and dying, I'll go to that later. But there are other drugs that have more than one use. I think that's called black box use, if I'm not mistaken. And Sister Stephanie or Sister Darlene, you may know the correct term. But those are drugs that they are normally prescribed for one purpose, but they can also be used for another one. An example of a drug that is used for, surprisingly, treatment, but it is also an addictive drug and a dangerous one at that, would be methadone. So people may get addicted to oxycodone, or even people that are addicted to heroin. They can be treated for their addiction or to maintain. And when I say maintain, that just means to keep their addiction at the lowest possible level so they can still function in society. Methadone would be used to would be prescribed to them for that purpose, or Suboxone, which is another drug they use in the treatment of addiction. Both of these drugs have addictive qualities. Both of those drugs also have medical purpose outside of addiction. For instance, methadone is a good drug for pain management. It's a cheap drug for pain management, but methadone is one of the more dangerous drugs that you can use because methadone stays in your system a lot longer than some of these other controlled substances that have a shorter lifespan. And people may think, I'm not feeling the relief, or either it's worn off. They may take more methadone, not realizing it is still in your body. So that's one of the drugs that makes it very easy to overdose on. So once you start adding more to it, because you think I'm no longer feeling the effect, or the pain is back, or I just don't think it's working, a lot of people have overdosed and died using methadone. So all of these drugs are important to keep in mind, just even when you're using them for medical purposes. Take it the way the doctor tells you to. Don't think that you can circumvent the doctor's instructions, and don't think that you are beyond being addicted to it. You can get it very, very quickly on any of these drugs.
They used to, Sister Who, they used to have methadone clinics. Do they still have those?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, they do. And speaking of that, so when I mentioned that they use methadone to maintain or try to help people get out of their addiction, keep in mind that if you're still taking methadone, and what normally happens in a methadone clinic, people who are first starting out, and they go to a methadone clinic, they want to get out of their drug addiction, they're going to be prescribed a certain amount of methadone. And when we're talking about methadone, there are two different ways that methadone is prescribed. So if it is used just for, let's say, pain management, then a doctor is going to prescribe you pills to take, and you'll be taking, like normal drug you might take twice a day or something like that. When you go to a methadone clinic, there is a liquid methadone, there are methadone diskettes also, and they also have tablets. So when you go to a methadone clinic, you're normally going to be prescribed a much higher dose of methadone. Sometimes you could get as much as, I'm just going to say that I think the most I've seen is around 300 milligrams of methadone. So you would go in every day, you would get a dose of methadone. Some people get take-home doses, but beginning at first, you have to come to the clinic every day and take your methadone. And as you are in the treatment, they will start tapering off the amount of methadone that you are taking each day. But keep in mind, you're still in an addiction. So you can't just say, I'm going to stop. Let's say you're now on 200 milligrams a day. You still have an addiction to it. Your body is still going to be addicted. You may still be psychologically addicted. And I will bring that up because I've actually been to clinics where there's literally a drip drop of methadone in that little dose. And someone is still coming every single day to take that little drip drop. That to me is more of a psychological addiction than a physical addiction. But you can't just, or it would not be advisable to just stop if you're in a high dose of methadone, because you're still physically in an addiction. So you are correct, though, methadone is used for that purpose. And yes, they do still have those clinics. So let me switch over to something I want to point out for medical professionals, because they need to keep this in mind too. We all have heard of people being charged with illegal distribution of controlled substances. Normally, we associate that with a drug dealer on the street. Doctors can also be charged with illegal distribution of controlled substances. So if we have any medical professionals listening, if you are writing for any controlled substance, and most importantly, you want to pay attention to Schedule II controlled substances. If you are writing for prescriptions and it is outside of medical need or practice, which what is normally considered the norm for the medical practice, if you are prescribing to someone you know is addicted and you are not trying to get them help, if you're prescribing just in a manner that, let's say a patient is coming to you and they're just asking for it and you're just giving it to them, if it is outside of what is legal, and nobody can tell you more than probably just the medical board, but if it looks wrong, it feels wrong, and you have questions about it, there are sources to go to kind of ask, questions about. But if you are doing this and your patients are dying, and let's say, when I say outside of medical practice, and I'll use Oxycontin or oxycodone as an example. If you're prescribing something that generally a person needs to only take one pill every 12 hours, but you're prescribing enough for 12 pills every 12 hours, that seems to be a little shady. And you are now no different than, if you're prescribing someone in that manner, you couldn't, considering the circumstances, you may be no different than a drug dealer on the street, and you can be charged just like a drug dealer on the street. So your charges, if your patient is now coming in, you're just feeding an addiction, or you are given to patients who clearly are selling their medication, now you are involved in illegal distribution of controlled substances and you can be charged. Keeping that in mind, if your patient overdoses and dies, or they overdose and maybe have medical issues as a result, you could also be possibly be charged with even more. And generally it would be looked at as illegal distribution of controlled substance, and you could also be charged with causing bodily harm. And especially if that patient dies, they can tie it to your prescribing and it was outside of what is legally accepted, then you could be charged with that. And there is a mandatory 20-year sentence if you cause that person's death, if they are prescribed a Schedule II drug that causes their death. So that's something that medical professionals need to be aware of. And as a patient, most of us understand what a normal doctor-patient relationship looks like. If your doctor is not examining you, not asking the right questions, they're just, writing out a prescription, or they're even pushing prescriptions on you, because there are times where I have seen doctors who they do like the money. There have been times where they will just easily write out a prescription, not take the time with the patient, clearly understand what's going on. If you have a doctor that you're concerned about, don't go. Get yourself another doctor, because these are dangerous drugs. And again, the addiction is so great, and it is not easy to break away from an addiction. Any questions?
They would, some doctors, there at one time there were a lot of what they call pain clinics, and doctors would refer their patients to these clinics, and they were actually, you had to take cash, and they were actually given, and I'm sure you know this, but they were actually given as much medication, or that would, so you at one time you saw a lot of arrests of these pain clinics.
Yes.
Yeah.
You
So,
are
and
absolutely right. And I'll give you an example of what a pain clinic looks like. And some people may be younger, so they may not remember or know about this, but there's still situations that happen. It's just not as bad as it used to be. And with almost anything, there's an ebb and flow. So at one point, methamphetamine was like a big drug, and I'm going to touch on that as well in a moment. But street drugs, you start having, when there's a clamp down, it gets harder to get those, or people, more deaths or whatever. Then you'll see things switch over to something else. Then, something, in this case, in the early 2000s, pain clinics were a big thing. And it probably was a major issue where we started seeing a lot of the opioid addiction starting in the early 2000s, probably into maybe 2015 or so, where you started seeing it, slow down a bit. But in those cases, and this is, if most of us think about it, this is not what happens when you go to the doctor. But in a pain clinic, you could go in, there may be 50 people there, and they may be there before the clinic opens. There's a line, or people just sitting in the car. You go in, and again, some places it's standing room only. People clearly don't look like the regular folks that you would see in a doctor. When I go to the doctor, there may be 3 people, 4 people. The most I've seen, maybe 8 people waiting, depending on the number of doctors in that practice. I've never been to the doctor where there were 50, 60 people just standing around. But you would go in with your cash, and back at that time, it could be as much as $400 cash. Most of these places would not accept insurance at all. So you go in and you pay cash money, and keep in mind, everyone else there is paying cash too. So you have 40 or 50 people that have gone to the doctor paying $400 cash. You go see the doctor, he's in there no longer than 2 minutes. And sometimes a patient can tell the doctor what they want. Sometimes the doctor would just suggest something and just write a prescription. You're in and out. Then you take that prescription. In a lot of cases, there would be a pharmacy working along with this doctor or his clinic. Actually, at one point, a lot of the doctors had controlled substances in their office, but that changed a bit. But you would go to a pharmacy. Now you're paying. And sometimes the pharmacy, even if they're not working together, they would accept the insurance. But I have seen cases where people were paying cash at the doctor, and I would see them pay as much as $1,200 cash to get these prescriptions filled at the pharmacy. Most of us can't afford that. Those of us who work can't afford that. And again, why would you do that if your insurance is going to pay for it, if you definitely need these things? So that was the face of a pain clinic. And if anybody wants to see what a pain clinic, how bad it was at one point, CNN had a documentary called American Pain. I suggest everybody watch it. It was a phenomenal case because it shows what was going on at the time and how egregious it was. So yeah, you're absolutely right. Moving on to something else that people aren't aware of, we have things called listed chemicals. A listed chemical is a chemical that has a legitimate use. Sometimes it can be used like fertilizer has, I think it's phosphorus that's in fertilizer. That is a chemical. But yes, a lot of people are not aware iodine, pseudoephedrine, and ephedrine are also chemicals. And listed chemicals are regulated. And they are regulated because these are legal chemicals that are used to make illicit drugs. So I mentioned iodine and pseudoephedrine and ephedrine. Those are chemicals that are used to make methamphetamine, but they're also chemicals that have legitimate use for it. We know, if you're old enough, people put iodine on them when they had a scratch or something. Pseudoephedrine and ephedrine is used for decongestion, people that have allergies. Legal uses, however, they can be used to make methamphetamine. So other drugs that use chemicals to make illicit drugs like PCP, Flocka, LSD, and GHB. GHB is the date rape drug. All of those illegal drugs use legal chemicals to be made. So just because, and I want to point out, just because something like pseudoephedrine and ephedrine look like a tablet, it is actually a chemical. So that is another, and some people may have noticed that, especially those of us that are old enough, at one point you could just go into the convenience store or any Walmart and you could just buy pseudoephedrine and ephedrine and however much you wanted to. That changed because, again, when methamphetamine became a big problem, they had to clamp down on the availability and also be able to see who is purchasing what. And this is why you started seeing the change in how much pseudoephedrine and ephedrine you can purchase. Any other questions? Anything we want to discuss?
I didn't know all of that.
Yeah. Well, I remember back in like 1998 when they first started in therapy, where they first started giving orthopedic patients that had surgery Oxycontin. And they were told that it wasn't addictive. And some of those, and quite a few of them, at that point, I don't think they were concerned about how many prescriptions they got. They did cut them off at some point.
Can I interrupt you real quick, sister?
Okay, go ahead.
I'm looking at Cindy Russell is asking, are there regulations that govern the sales and is it still going on? There are absolutely regulations. That is why you have the Board of Pharmacy, you have the Medical Board, and you have the Drug Enforcement Administration. When I mentioned the controlled substances and the different schedules and listed chemicals, the Drug Enforcement Administration is the agency, the federal agency that governs or regulates those things. So every DEA actually has a unit or a function of investigators called diversion investigators who go into any place that manufactures, distributes, even doctors that prescribe, especially the methadone clinics, and they do inspections there's a time frame for each different types of registrants, and that's what you're called. If you're handling any controlled substance, you have to register with the Drug Enforcement Administration. So that is what that group of investigators, that is part of what they do in addition to criminal investigations. And speaking of criminal investigations, when I mentioned the American Pain, that was an investigation that shows the type of places that the diversion side looks at. There's also a great Netflix documentary called The Pharmacist. And if anybody remembers Dope Sick, that was also on Netflix. Prime examples of the type of investigations that DEA does with their diversion group that handles doctors and these pill mills. And, if you want to see what they do, that's totally different from street crimes. That's what you would want to watch to get an idea and to see how those cases are worked. Yes, there are not as many of the, you don't see as many of the pill mills, but you sometimes will come across some of the doctors that are still doing this. And keep in mind, I mentioned the amount of money that people at one point could pay to go in for cash. Think about how much money these clinics make a day. And if you watch American Pain, you'll get a good idea of how much money was flowing into these type of clinics. But when the clamp down started coming on these clinics, and it became a lot harder and a lot more expensive to sell those kind of drugs on the street, then you saw a shift back to heroin. And for example, I don't want to give the exact amount, but depending on the city that you're in, the pills for oxycodone, hydrocodone, some of these other drugs, Xanax would not sell as much because it's not, a strong drug, but those pills sell on the street pretty high. And the amount of what you can buy it or sell it for would be based on the milligram in most cases. When it became so expensive, people get addicted. So now they're going to need more. they can't afford to keep up with what it is on the street. So heroin and Oxycontin are very similar. One is one is well, they both are similar in the effects they have on your body and the type of high. So people will switch over from those pharmaceutical drugs to heroin because at that time, heroin was a lot cheaper on the street. So this is what I talk about when I say the ebb and flow, because once you're in the throes of an addiction, your goal is just what can I get and how can I get it at the cheapest amount when I need it. So if you can't get those pills because it's a clamp down and it's so expensive to feed your habit, now you're going to go with the cheaper route. And we know, just like these drugs I'm talking about, heroin is addictive and it's very dangerous too. So, I would suggest if you don't have to take a controlled substance, don't. If you have pain, there's therapies. There are other drugs that are for pain that are not controlled substances that are not addictive. If you have anxiety, there are other drugs that you can take or natural remedies, which is why Sister Ashley is such a good resource. There are natural remedies for some of these problems that people have. We have to also keep in mind that there's a whole industry out there to make money off of our illness. So yes, anxiety is real. Yes, depression is real. Yes, people have problems sleeping, like Ambien is a controlled substance I mentioned. Though all of these things are real, but before all of these drugs were there, people were able to treat it. So we don't have to let a controlled substance be our go-to every time we have an ounce of pain or discomfort. Try something else beforehand, because again, these drugs are so addictive, and you don't want to fight a lifelong addiction. I've never been addicted to anything, but I've heard the talk. I've talked to people that when I was working in that field that had addictions, who told me how they got on those drugs. And it always started, somebody would say I had an injury, and then they ended up addicted to a drug. So try not to let a doctor have that be your go-to. Like I had 4 wisdom teeth removed at one time years ago. I got 10 Vicodin pills. That's reasonable. But if I had gotten 60, that's not reasonable. And even when I got the 10 Vicodin, I only took 2. So I've had a C-section. I got Demerol. I think I took 2. So just keep in mind, we can push through pain. We were never told that life goes without pain. And we should not try to put a Band-Aid on every single discomfort that comes with life. That's just part of life.
Absolutely. That is amazing that you said that. That is so good. Yeah, we don't. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
We've been taught that we can't have any discomfort, and that's a lie from the pits of hell. It's just part of life.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, like you were saying, Sister Nisa, there are things that were created for us to be able to take naturally for these particular things. What a lot of people don't know is that because our body chemistry, it's even designed to heal itself.
Right.
He created us to be able for the body to just literally, it can heal itself, and it can heal itself from anything. But just like the brain, I want to talk about a little bit about the brain and how it can be controlled through substance. And so a lot of times, and that's good you went into all of this, because people who are in the audience and people who are outside the audience or just now coming in probably need to hear this, because they have someone in their family, like in my family. A lot of times people get addicted to these types of things because they come from a family, maybe the sister, the brother, cousin, or they have a mom or dad or something that's into all of this. And so they're thinking as they're growing up, this is okay to do this. Sometimes being in the streets a lot, hanging out with the wrong people can lead you into these different gateways or alleyways or whatever you might want to call them. But the brain is like anything else. It absorbs, it's like a sponge. So whatever you put into your body, that's what it's going to absorb. And and once the body comes up out of something and it heals itself, what you want to begin to start putting inside of that is all things that are healthy for it, to reprogram it, too. And this is the healing side of it, without having to use other things to lessen the withdrawal. So foods, for example, which is one, I love it. So therefore, as you go into it, you want to put all things that are good and natural inside of the body. Foods that are full of vitamins A, C, K, vitamins E, vitamin B, all those things that are rich in color. You want to start to download or put it back into the system once the system has come off of withdrawal from a particular drug. This is where the healing process comes in. This is one of the mechanisms that you can actually use to do that. Herbs, I cannot, for protocol reasons, there are herbs that you can use. I'm not going to name anything specific simply because everybody's chemistry is different. Everybody's chemistry is different. So I can recommend something and then somebody says, "Ooh, she said," and then you can go and you try this and then it doesn't work, right? So that's why it's important to get people to know that that's more of a consultation type thing so that they can understand whether it's a depression or whether it's something that you might be going through, that person who is clinically known for that practice of what they do to be able to prescribe what's necessary for you to use. So you are, this is amazing. I greatly appreciate all of the information that you're giving. And yeah, this is a good resource for people who may, want to understand the things so that they can look at their family members and say, okay, this is what they're going through. Wow, maybe I need to, have them look into certain things to help heal my body. So yeah, no, keep flowing with it. Keep flowing.
To everybody's point, there, the opioids, as well as just any type of pharmaceutical medication, first starts with a natural compound that comes from nature. So if you just get the natural compound, you could really avoid the addiction. Even though, I mean, of course, it has to be regulated, and you just can't go taking something because, like Sister Ashley said, everybody's biochemistry is different, and it may metabolize something more quicker than another person's, and that's really how the addiction starts. Because sometimes, you may take a substance, and then after a while, it may not start working because your body, your liver, is metabolizing it very quickly, and it sends a signal to your brain to be like, okay, hey, we need more because I no longer am turning off this pain sensor. Is back activated because it metabolized too soon. Now, to get rid of, I guess, the addiction, of course, to Sister Ashley's point, she had mentioned eating like cruciferous vegetables, so vegetables with a lot of color. Then that's because it has antioxidant properties, and the antioxidant properties will help to detoxify your body.
Yeah, and I forgot to
share. And I just wanted to say that whenever they push out a new drug and to the public, that's a different phase of the clinical trial. So until they find out how that drug is going to react on a person, the first time they push it out, you're still under a clinical trial. One example would be the birth control pill. Women were taking the birth control pill and smoking and drinking and having strokes. So just be aware when they say, well, we got a new drug out, that when they first push it out, you're still under part of the clinical trial.
And to that point, Sister Darlene, that I mentioned that there were certain people that had to register to handle the controlled substances. Researchers are one of those groups of people. So when they're in clinical trials, a lot of the pharmaceutical companies or drug manufacturers, they have a research and development section of their company, and their researchers they have to get a researcher registration so that they can research those drugs. However, as we were saying though, by the point that it's out for the public use, it's already been researched, they've already been approved to manufacture that drug and then sell that drug. But I wanted to stress for those people who are on controlled substances, please lock up your medications. Don't let family members know that you're taking them, especially grandparents or aunts and uncles. You may have those nephews, nieces, cousins, grandkids that are coming to your house. You don't know what they're doing. We pray that they're all, upright and upstanding citizens, or they're not on drugs, but you don't know. Lock your controlled substances up. Don't leave them in your medicine cabinet. Put them somewhere that they are safe. And also, do not throw away your controlled substances. If you're no longer using them, there is a legal way to get rid of them. You can't just flush them down the toilet, because there are some issues dealing, EPA issues or environmental issues. If you're flushing them in the toilet, these same drugs are getting into the fish and getting into our water systems. So there is a legal way to do it. There's a drug take back twice a year. It may have moved to once a year now. But there are also boxes set up in some of the pharmacies, some of the police departments. Take those controlled substances and put them in those boxes, or take them to the take back, because you don't want them floating around. If you have family members who have passed away, a lot of people have family members that have died of cancer. A lot of cancer patients are on these strong painkillers because it helps them in a situation that they actually need it. But take those medications and get rid of them legally, because you don't want them just sitting around your house. When I tell you there is a market on the street for them, it is. And I'm not telling you this because hopefully nobody's listening will get the idea to go sell them, but you don't want them just floating around, and you don't want them just there for somebody to use because they can overdose. And I will say this for parents: your kids sometimes are involved in things that you don't know. A lot of the things that look innocent, stickers, or now you have people vaping, but a lot of these things look like candy. And I'm speaking specifically to like marijuana or sometimes fentanyl. Get into these things, and they are packaged and marketed to kids. So it looks very much like a regular candy. It is not always candy. There are some things like ecstasy that look just like Flintstones vitamins. Be mindful of what your kids have in their room. If it looks like candy, take a good look at it, because it may not be candy and it may not be legal. So just, I know kids don't want you in their room, but it doesn't matter. If you're paying the bills there, that's your room. So
even if I wasn't, I'm still coming in the room.
yeah. Anybody that's staying in the house because you don't want that,
right?
But your kids, I'm sorry, they don't have a right to privacy. If they are at your house under 18 and they live under your roof, they have no right to privacy. So check their friends. Make sure these things that are just laying around in plain sight sometimes, and even with the vapes, some of them look like what do you call it, a computer flash drive. It could be something so innocuous in your face that you don't even realize what it is. Take the time to look. Take the time to ask questions. If you have a kid that's constantly in long sleeves, and I want to touch on this too, because we're looking at these pills and we're like, well, I take a hydrocodone and I don't get high and I don't do this. They're not always taking them as a pill. you get an instant high, the same kind of high that you would get from heroin by or amphetamines, by crushing those pills up. And what people do is snort them and inject them. It is not people always just popping a pill. When you take it in that and that's the illegal way to take it. Is not, I don't want to say illegal, but that is not the normal way to take it. These people are not just saying, oh, I want a pill. No, a lot of times they're crushing them, injecting them, or snorting them. So this is why I say, if your kids are walking around all the time with their long sleeves and it's hot as all get out, I know it's the style now. Everybody walks around in hoodies and long sleeves. Check your kids out sometimes. Are there puncture marks on their arms, on their legs? Check your kids out sometimes, because we don't always know what's going on. And I can tell you from the side that I've seen, these, it's a lot going on right up under our nose and we don't even know.
I used to always wonder about a former friend that I had, like her teenagers used to always wear like hoodies in the summer. I'm like, what's wrong with the boy? What is wrong with you? Why are you wearing hoodies? And so now it makes sense. Mm-hmm. I mean, not accusing. I mean, I'm hoping that that's not the case, but
Yeah. And even with this promethazine with codeine, they're not just taking it to get rid of decongestion. They're mixing it in. They call it purple drink. It's getting mixed in with other things. Like, you think they're just drinking a soda. It's not always that. So, I mean, surely we know that rappers are not just turned on by taking cold medicine. That's not what they're doing. It's not taken in the manner that we would take it in, or the manner that it's intended. So everything that looks a certain way, it could be something else. Mm-hmm. Check your vents. That's another thing, because there are cases where the kids hide these things in their vents. Just check.
That's heavy. Wow, they hide it in their vents.
Mm-hmm. But again, some stuff just looks like, like I said, it may look like a bag of gummies. It may look like Flintstone vitamins or those Smarties. Double check it. Make sure the packaging is, again, because they do a lot of cartoon-like packaging. Like I'm looking at some Brocs that my daughter gave me the other day. And those are those little, I guess you get them around Easter, I guess. But look at the ingredients. Make sure it is what it says it is. If you're not familiar with the brand, double check.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, to your point, like you said, I think some of the rappers had passed away. I think one of them was called Pimp C. Mm-hmm. Pimp C, I think he passed away from lean. And then two, of course, it affects your mentality, because it's a drug. And then two, it affects the way that a person thinks. So if a person does stop, I guess self-medicating, then sometimes their brain activity as well as their mentality is altered, and sometimes permanently.
Yeah. And another thing too, you may, people who get addicted, sometimes, and even if you haven't been on these drugs, if you have taken them long enough, and let me sidetrack. If you're taking something like hydrocodone, it's not something that you should be on for the rest of your life. So if your doctor is prescribing it for years and years, unless there's a real reason, and I'm not a medical doctor, so I can't tell you this, but if you are on something that's supposed to be short-term treatment and you're on it for 12 years, and I've seen people on certain drugs like 7 to 10 years, but there's no change in the prescribing practice. There's no referral to, a pain doctor, and there are legal, legitimate pain doctors. There's no referral to occupational therapy or physical therapy, but they are continuing to prescribe and sometimes going up on the prescription for the same medication or mixing medicines that basically treat the same thing. That is not something that it doesn't make sense. So your body is not set up to process these drugs like that. I think Sister Ashley talked about the liver. It will damage your liver. So a normal doctor would be monitoring that as well. So keep that in mind. And we all need to keep in mind that some people have more addictive personalities, or there's addiction in their family. You don't always know.
Mm-hmm.
But I will go back to, once you're on these drugs and you're taking it long term, when you try to cut back or you try to stop, your body is going to feel pain because of the addiction. So you're taking it from your body. Your pain is not necessarily from what you initially were taking it from. Just stopping immediately causes pain. And I had to talk to a man once before who had gotten addicted to, I think it was oxycodone, and he said he was very, very addicted, but he said he finally just stopped cold turkey. And when I asked him about it, he said it was the worst thing he ever went through. He said it was like going through hell. And I asked him then, I said, well, what are you taking now for your pain? He's taking goody powders. Older people know what goody is. So I'm thinking, if you can maintain your pain with goodies, it was never the pain from the injury. It was the pain from him trying to get off of the pills, or when you don't get it in time, because like I said, at some point your body is addicted. If you're not getting your painkiller in time, your body is building up a tolerance for it. So now your body needs more. If you're not getting that, your body is starting to feel pain, but it's not pain from your injury, it's pain from withdrawal. And again, this man went from being highly addicted to oxycodone to just taking goody powders. That is not, like I said, that pain that he was feeling trying to get off of it was more the withdrawal. So we have to be able to understand that too. And again, I'm not a medical professional, but I know it on the other side, and what I'm telling you is what I've seen and what I've done.
Goody powders are bad too, but I guess it's better than the addictive medication that they're prescribed.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, withdrawal is painful.
Mm-hmm.
You talk to people who've gone through it, part of the symptoms is the pain. They have diarrhea. And another thing to keep in mind, and you'll see these commercials where they give the warnings for these drugs and they mention constipation. Well, opioids cause constipation. Anybody that's been in the hospital and needed any of these opioids, like I mentioned fentanyl, but Demerol is another one. If you've been on them for a few days, you are constipated. That is part of it. So when people are going through the withdrawal, they have the opposite. They're having diarrhea, they're having pain, so, it's not pleasant to go through withdrawal. But if you don't need them and you find yourself addicted, please reach out to a professional to help you get through it.
And there are, thank you, Sister Who, for that. This has really been an amazing discussion. But to those that are out there are herbs that you can use to detoxify. And I would say, for those who may be interested in that, you can literally just go online and look up detoxification for certain things that you may be going through, and it'll give you a list of things that you possibly can use to help remedy that. There are teas as well that will help to clean out and also detoxify your blood as well, too, because that's a part of the withdrawal too, is that the blood needs to be detoxified from the chemical or the substance that is within the system. And so it's the same thing, because when you begin to detoxify the body and clean the body out, you also cleaning the brain out, because it's just like a sponge. It's anything, whatever you put in it is going to absorb. So that's just something that I kind of wanted to let people know as well.
So Sister Bonnie made a point to pay attention to the psych drugs and the weight loss drugs. She's absolutely right. A lot of the psychological drugs, and I mentioned anxiety, a lot of them are Schedule 4s, but they're also addictive. And people don't pay attention to that, and they don't understand that. And I'm not even sure doctors are explaining that effectively, but she's right. The weight loss drugs, a lot of them are stimulants. So the same for people that are taking drugs for attention deficit disorder or attention deficit and hyperactivity disorder. Ritalin is a drug that's used to treat that. That is a stimulant, and basically for someone who has, ADD or ADHD, they need to calm down. And the stimulant has the opposite effect on them. People that are trying to lose weight, they have a stimulant that helps that process as well. But those are also drugs that are dangerous and addictive. So, we're like, oh, great, get some Ritalin or Concerta, I think it is, that they use for ADHD. Those are addictive drugs, and Sister Bonnie is absolutely right. Those are things that need to be monitored, and they still need to be locked up. They are addictive and they are dangerous.
That's true, because even like I guess some of the celebrities, you look at them, at least for the weight loss drugs, I mean, they're so skinny and gaunt, and then they're still promoting it. They're still promoting it. I'm like, when will you stop?
Yeah, I wasn't talking about the ones that seem to be popular now, but again, I'm in my 50s. A lot of us remember back in the 70s and 80s where people were taking certain drugs for weight loss. And I know,
Fedra.
Yeah. Ephedra is, I think there is a natural ephedra. So I'm not too sure, but I know when I was a kid like in the in the 70s, a lot of the famous people were taking, they would call them uppers and downers. So they would take and then they would take something to go to sleep at night. And that's how a lot of them.
Barbiturates.
Barbiturates, correct.
And amphetamine, yeah.
Yeah. And we're looking at the same thing, uppers and downers. They just, now we use the, pharmaceutical names for them, but they're still out there and people are still using them for the same purposes and or get high. So these things, I mean, and again, we have to remember that there is a entire pharmaceutical market out there to make money. And think about it, any drug, medication or whatever, if they're advertising on TV, and we all know how much it costs for advertising, just imagine how much they're making off the sales. They can't afford the advertising without selling it to you. Why are they telling you go ask the doctor for this particular medicine? Why are they spending millions of dollars on advertising unless they're going to make it back? There are companies that these doctors have conferences paid for by some of these pharmaceutical companies.
Right. They have lobbyists in your government, and that's how come they can push a drug that's not. They know the harmful side effects of it because they have the government and the lobbyists that will allow these harmful drugs out there, because every last one of them, when you hear the commercial, has some kind of negative side effect. So
that's so true.
They all have some kind of negative side effect. So you have to listen to because they have to tell you what could possibly happen. So when you hear the word sudden death or thoughts of suicide, it's something to be concerning about.
And one of the reasons why they say it so quickly, like some of those commercials, when they give you the warnings, it sounds like an auction. You can't even understand what they're saying, or they make it so small, or it goes across your screen so quickly. Legally, they have to tell you. But if you're trying to catch what they're saying, you can't always catch it because it's being thrown out there so fast. But yeah, anything, and I'm not saying by any stretch of the imagination that there is no purpose for it, because I know that there are people that need some of these drugs. I mean, chronic, cancer patients are in chronic pain. There are things that absolutely people need them for, but don't let that be the go-to, just your knee-jerk reaction to treat something. And this is why they're scheduled, because there is a medical use for all of them. But yeah, just be very, very careful.
Okay. All right. Well, we have come upon the hour. Does anybody have anything else to say, or would you like to extend it? Let me see if we can check the chat.
I want to thank you all for having me on. I enjoyed it. Hope I didn't talk too much.
No, this is very informative. Very informative.
Yes.
And much needed,
No,
especially in the times that we're going through right now. Where addiction, of course, it's always been a thing, but now that times are more oppressive and like there's a lot more pressure, I feel as though addiction may rise.
Yeah, and I think if we all are going through stresses and all, and we know that things are likely to get worse, just talk to, this is the time to communicate with each other, encourage each other. We all have to be aware that everybody is going through something. And instead of, unless you absolutely need something, talk to people. Don't just keep everything bottled up and think how you feel is abnormal, because we all have our issues. If you're in pain, if you're still able to get out and move around, move around. And, if you need to lose a little weight because your knees hurt, sometimes it's not because you need knee replacement. Sometimes it's just you're too heavy, So if you're having trouble sleeping, sleep on a different schedule, do whatever it takes naturally, or like Sister Ashley said, use some of the things that are available that are in nature. But let's, try to be more mindful, because things are not, it's not going to be easy. And actually, as things get harder, it's probably going to be even harder to get the things that you may need to treat things. So learn how to treat it naturally as well. Put some Bengay on when you need it. Bengay still works for some.
Mm-hmm. Because of the
Well, I was
menthol
just
properties.
no. Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying it still works because of the menthol and camphor properties that help.
Mm-hmm.
There's a question in the chat. Brother Fast Nickel is asking if alcoholism is genetic.
We didn't talk about alcoholism, but some people there are some things that are genetic, and addictions oftentimes are. However, anything that you're using for an extended period of time and abusing, you have the possibility of your body getting a physical addiction. So again, this is why it's important to keep these things in mind. But yes, there are some people that they're just wired that way, where alcoholism runs in the family, or drug addiction. Yes.
Okay, so I kind of beg to differ with that a little bit. And I'm only saying this because I know that a lot of times it's learned behavior. Genetically, in creation, he didn't create us attached to these things. So I'm looking at the genetics, okay? So a lot of times, like I was saying in the very beginning, to Fast Nickel's question, if it's in your environment, let's just say that, okay? The only way that may be an issue or may be a problem, and is if the mother, say for instance, was drinking when she was pregnant, right? And a lot of times when that happens, that chemical substance, sure, it can, but the baby would go through a withdrawal period. It's the
Mhm.
same thing with the drug. When whatever you put it in your bloodstream is also going chemically up into your brain because they're like sponges, right? So I would say to something like that, I think it's more so a learned behavior or it's a behavior that runs in your family, and that's probably comes from generations back. And if that's the issue, then it's something else that might be a little bit more that's going on in the environment more so than it being genetically linked. Let me just say that. Now that's just me because I'm speaking from a natural biblical side of what I think uh, we were designed genetically from the Most High, from soil. So right, and so to me, I think that's more of a family thing. Now, people say, "Oh, yeah, it's linked to this," or obesity ran in my family, so that's why I'm fat, or everybody's on drugs, so that's why I am. A lot of that is learned behavior. I would say it for me. This is just my personal opinion. People may beg to differ with that, but we always want to connect it to something, so that gives us authority to be able to do that. No, I was just going to tell people to. Um, let's work on trying to keep our temples clean in this environment in this time because like Sister Who was saying it's very and Sister Stephanie was saying things are getting ready to become very toxic. So one of the things, of course, we naturally know we have to line our temples up with the word, right?
Mhm.
And so it's important for us that if we are tearing down our physical, this is where spiritual come in. I know Darlene, she's a prayer person. She's in the scriptures and the word, and she would probably agree, like you all would. We have to get ourselves back to the creator and we have to begin to start taking care of our temples in an environment that's very toxic. Now, that's just my opinion, Fast Nickel. I don't know. Doctors may say different, but for me, I don't think that we are genetically tied
Right.
to these particular
I
substances. I
can
think
agree
it's
with
more a
that.
learned behavior in the environments in which we come from, and
Look at
that's
Now,
spiritual one.
now I kind of have a different opinion that I think that there is some genetic causes to
okay.
because it's like the generational curses that
Mhm.
we bring, and if the
Mhm.
sperm itself has alcoholism in it, and even if the mother doesn't drink, you still carry that DNA, that marker of like they can look and see, and if your child is gonna have autism or something like that. So that it carries because let me back up because you see a child that may not have been raised with one of the parents, but have some of those um, genetic, the way they do things, or the way they say things, or the way they act of that parent. So I think that there's some truth to that, but to say that it might carry over to each child may not be the point. One child might have that marker of
Mhm.
dependency, uh,
Mhm.
and then the other one may not. So that's
Hmm.
kind of how if I'm explaining that right,
No,
um,
that actually you are, and I think that's. I mean, I'm not saying for sure, but I'm talking about specific subs. I think for me, it's specific substances. Now, yeah, I know we do carry the generational curse from Deuteronomy, right? I understand, and I know that a lot of that was brought with some of us, but when it comes to a chemical, this is just kind of where my mind goes, I guess. When it comes to like alcoholism or like a drug, you watch that as you were growing up. Now, you're right, the sperm it has all of the DNA markers in it and everything, right? Um, but like I said, that's just my opinion on that particular thing. But certain diseases, yeah, they have it may be linked to that, but I just believe that, I don't know if we were all designed. And you guys help me out here now. Help me to understand because I'm just trying to make sure that I'm being very clear as what I'm saying in the direction I'm trying to go. I just don't believe that. I believe that those behaviors are more learned behaviors than they are genetic when it comes to like alcohol.
Well,
I guess that's the best way to say it.
why don't we
Or
just say
DNA.
it can be both? Because
Yeah.
I think it is a learned behavior. If that's like if you grow up in a family that they're just drinking and drugging, partying all the time, that's your go-to. I mean, you just do it because they do. But that doesn't eliminate the possibility of your body, like in my family, my grandfather, everyone on my grandfather's side, his sister, his mother, his brother, they're all we're all alcoholics. I don't necessarily have a taste for alcohol. I'll drink a glass of wine every so often, but I try to keep in mind that it's very possible that I may carry the genetic marker to be an addict if I were to start using. I just don't, I just don't have a taste for it. But I would not eliminate that being a possibility just because I know what's in my family line. Um, but I think it can be a little bit of both. And
Right.
this
It's
is
good.
why, I don't think we can pinpoint it.
Right.
Whether it's
Exactly. I agree
like
with that.
what came first, the chicken or the egg. But I think we just all need to be mindful that if you're putting a substance into your body that is not natural or unnecessary, then there's no need to, unless you absolutely have to, don't put it in your body. But just be mindful that there are warnings, there are things to consider to make it something that either needs to be kept to a minimum or monitored properly.
Right. And I agree. It could be both. It could
Mhm.
be both.
Me too. I agree with that. I agree with that.
Mhm.
Yeah. I'm just thinking about substances more
Yeah,
so than like diseases or something like that.
yeah.
I guess maybe. Yeah.
And let's just have grace for each other and family members that have these problems. And that's why I say, in
Mhm.
these trying times, let's just be very open in talking to each other. People will have anxiety. People are going to have sleepless nights. There are going to be people that want to use a drug or alcohol for escape from what they're seeing. This is why it's so important for us to be in prayer, to talk to each other, and lean on each other. I would much rather one of you sisters come talk to me than I find out you're drinking at home because you're stressed out about what's going on, or shooting up a drug or taking a pill because you're so stressed out about what's going on. If it's easier and we are supposed to be a community, we need to reach out to each other and just talk and have grace with each other and don't dismiss each other, because everybody is going through something and we need to depend on each other more than we need to depend on a pill bottle.
Mhm.
Absolutely. I agree. I agree.
Well, I have nothing else to say.
All right.
I
Does
just
anybody
want,
have closing remarks?
like we've been the Pookie and Ray Rays on the street,
That's
locked up, and we've been the face of the drug culture, the drug use, the drug everything. And I'm sick of our people being that. And we don't
Mhm.
have to be that. We are greater than that, and we need to step away from it with information and just intention. So let's just come out of all of that mess, leave that for whoever else wants to deal with it. Those trying to push it on us, let's turn our back on it. Just get away from it. We are not the face of drugs and addiction, and we will not be. So let's just step away from that.
I just say keep your temples clean. Let's try to clean our temples up and keep ourselves like you always saying because the environment is getting ready to be so toxic. with all of the stuff that's going on. It's so much going on right now. And I think you said it good. You said it well. Also that we have to begin to start depending on each other, calling one another when somebody's not feeling well, when somebody's not doing well, being able to connect and be that support, that we're going to need, because we're definitely going to need it in these times.
Yeah, exactly. And I want to thank everyone, Sister Who. It was a wonderful conversation. Be aware too that over the years how they have pushed these substances into our community, and that these are all the tricks that of the evil one, and that anytime they give you some, you have to be or put something in our neighborhoods. We have to be really mindful. Because they make it seem like it's gonna be great for you, or you're gonna feel good, and then it's a trap. It's all a trap. So yeah.
Yeah, and look how even the way they deal with addiction. When it was Pookie and Ray Ray, they were dope heads. They were drug addicts. They get locked up. And when it switched over to another demographic, it's opioid use disorder. They need treatment. They need money thrown into the treatment for them. They don't go to jail, they go to treatment. When they get arrested, they go into treatment. But Pookie and Ray Ray was sitting up in jail. If you were selling a certain type of drug, i.e. crack, you were going to jail forever. If you now they're selling pills on the street. They don't go to jail. I mean, they may, but they go to treatment and they get probation. And now that it has switched, and it's been a few years since it switched in demographic use, now don't think they won't start trying to push something on us. Please be mindful. The enemy is crafty. Don't let them start pushing stuff on. A lot of us have awakened. A lot of us are trying to live right, trying to return to, living a godly lifestyle or a righteous lifestyle. Don't let these people push something on you to trip you up and put an obstacle in your way. Stay steadfast and focused on the Most High. Don't let these people trap you into something that we don't need to be involved in. Like I said, we are not, and we will not be the face of that. Let them have it if that's what they want. But let's stay away from it and turn to each other and turn to the Most High.
Definitely agree. I have nothing else to say. I mean, this is an excellent live, and I totally agree with everybody's sentiments. Everybody stay diligent and fervent for the Most High, and remember to keep your temples holy, or Kodesh, so that Yahusha will be able to feel it and will be able to utilize it. So everybody stay blessed, keep well, and Shabbat Shalom.
Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Peace and blessings.
Peace and blessings.
Shalom.